None of the content on this or any episode of the Kratom Science Podcast and Kratom Science Journal Club, nor on any of the pages of KratomScience.com, should be considered medical claims or medical advice. This is the Kratom Science Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Gallagher, blog and social media writer for KratomScience.com. Your source for all things Kratom. Episode 64 is our Veterans Day special. We take a look back at 4 United States military veterans who had a Kratom story to share with us. To all the veterans listening, we recognize the courage it takes to sign up for your job. We appreciate you and happy Veterans Day. From episode 13, we have Drew Turner. I saw Drew in the documentary Leaf of Faith. I'm grateful to still correspond with him now and again about Kratom issues when he can. He's a Navy veteran, served in Iraq and Guantanamo Bay.
I was in the Navy. I started in 2003. I'd been living overseas. I came back to the U.S., joined the Navy at the ripe old age of 30, so I was a little bit older than your average recruit. Basically, my time in the Navy was almost straight deployed overseas, and, along with military deployments come injuries many times, especially if you're deployed into, certain war zones and other things like that.
Yeah.
My Navy service, though, in 2012 ended because in 2009, I had been stationed at Guantanamo. And while we were removing a detainee from his cell, he decided that he wanted, it was a long day of many detainees trying to self-harm.
Oh, okay.
We couldn't allow that to happen.
Yeah.
He was restrained, and I wasn't really watching what he was doing, and he just proceeded to try to bite me. I moved my hands, and he started smashing his head into the floor, and we couldn't let that happen. So I kind of had to take one for the team, and in doing so, it destroyed my right wrist, caused a pretty severe nerve damage, and to this day, I don't have what most would consider a functional right hand.
Wow.
And I'm right-handed, which makes it a little more difficult. And in my job in the Navy, I was basically armed 24/7 except for that deployment at Guantanamo. And if you can't qualify with a firearm in the job that I worked in, you weren't going to last in the job. So in 2012, the Navy released me from service, and my health progressively deteriorated, not just from the hand injury, but also due to PTSD. And it turns out a lot of other issues that came along, a movement disorder that I developed a couple years after being discharged, they believe and the cancer that I've been fighting, they believe were attached to exposure to the burn pits in the Middle East while I was deployed there. So for me, it wasn't the pain in my hand that caused me to seek out Kratom. It was actually this movement disorder. It caused severe stuttering. It caused severe muscle spasms through my face and my neck to the point where I couldn't even speak when it would be really kicking in. And a lot of it's linked to the PTSD as well as other neurological issues going on. So then we had to move on to medications. I was taking anti-inflammatories and some things for my PTSD, but not much. But as this developed, they had to start trying all these different medications in 2013, 2014 to address this issue. Well, the movement disorder I developed, there really wasn't a lot of medications that would work for it. And because it's a fairly rare movement disorder, there just isn't it's basically guinea pigging and trying whatever medication they can use for movement disorders to see what works.
Yeah.
And sadly, nothing worked.
Mm-hmm.
So I wound up having to leave my job with the federal government. That's what I had done after I got out of the military. I worked for the federal government for almost 2 years. but I wound up having to leave that job because there was just no way to functionally work with the movement disorder. And so we spent several years trying to find a solution to get me back into a place where I could be a functional member of society.
Yeah.
We never found that with the medication.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2015-ish, I don't remember the exact month. I believe it was like March, but it may have been April or May. I was at a point where my doctor basically knew that I had lost hope.
Mm-hmm.
I was at that point, and when you've got, military service members lose hope a lot. That's part of one of the reasons why we have 22 a day on average committing suicide.
Yeah.
And I think my doctors realized that, and they saw that the medication just wasn't doing what we expected. I had basically become a shut-in. I just couldn't do much. I couldn't functionally drive at that time.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough to go from being this big, strong military member that's doing all of these things and traveling the world to basically a couple years later being trapped in your home and losing hope.
Yeah.
So my doctor really started challenging me, and he said, look, we need to find something. He goes, let's look at something else. He goes, what about we stop the medications or at least taper you off some of them? And he goes, and let's try something different. He goes, maybe let's try yoga, or maybe let's try acupuncture, or maybe let's try, herbal teas, or, he just threw out a lot of different things. He goes, we could try cannabis. We could, but because he was a VA doctor and a federal employee, he couldn't recommend cannabis.
Yeah.
And he couldn't recommend a lot of the other things that work. Now there's some studies into psilocybin, for PTSD and for other things. And that was my biggest issue, was addressing my anxiety and PTSD that we found out later caused a lot of the movement disorder. Not all of it, but it definitely exacerbated the situation.
Yeah.
So I spent several months really heavily reading online, getting onto Reddit, getting onto, Blue Light, getting onto any of the forums online I could find that talked about things people were trying to address movement disorders and to address PTSD and anxiety, and because I knew that I was running out of time. And when I say that, I'm physically saying that I was on a path to suicide.
Yeah. There's
not a question in my mind that was the direction I was headed.
Yeah.
So the funny part was I kept reading, and in the same places I'd read about people using marijuana for things and CBD for things, I kept seeing this word Kratom popping up. At that time, we hadn't reached the national outcry, where the DEA tried to ban it in 2016. Mm-hmm. The FDA then after, the next 2 years put the pressure onto the community to make it a Schedule I. So it was still kind of an underground thing, but not completely underground. It definitely wasn't as widespread as you see it today here in the U.S.
Yeah.
You definitely weren't driving down the street in most areas and seeing signs out in front of stores, advertising Kratom at that time.
Yeah, yeah.
I kept seeing so many things related to the use and consumption of Kratom that I said, this sounds like snake oil. Because if this was real, why hadn't I heard of this before? That was my thinking. And I suspect a lot of people, as they first start trying Kratom or hear about it, that's that same thinking. And it's kind of embarrassing to look back and say, man, why didn't I have this faith? But you're just not, it's not something that we're developed for the most part here in this country, at least, to have that idea that natural things can play a beneficial role in your wellness.
Yeah.
So it took me a while. It took me a while to really kind of come around, and even some time talking with my doctors, and we had to spend time looking for basically any study we could find at that time because my doctors wanted to know more. But one of the benefits was in 2015, there also wasn't this huge misinformation campaign, from the likes of people like, Gottlieb at the FDA,
mm-hmm.
And so the doctor kind of looked at the safety profile of it and said, it doesn't look like this will be harmful. He said, but we've got to get you off all these medications first because do you want to try this? And I said, I got nothing left to lose. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
So, he, of course, he couldn't provide it to me. He couldn't track it down for me, but we spent some time kind of reading as much as we could and trying to find out what to look for in a reputable Kratom vendor. I still didn't know much at that time, and so we kind of just rolled the dice and saw what we got. It was a night and day difference. The wellness that it promoted was incredible. I couldn't, and I don't want to say, okay, it's only Kratom that does these things for my health, because that's not really true. I do spend a lot of time working on my health, but at that time it kind of directed me down a different path,
Mm-hmm.
and it gave me reasons to get off of all these medications that I was taking. There was something in the neighborhood of 20 different medications I took at that time, or that I was prescribed.
Yeah.
And today, just 5 years later, I generally only have a prescription for one medication, but I haven't even refilled that prescription that I get for cluster headaches in months. So, I haven't increased the amount of Kratom I'm consuming over this time.
Mm-hmm.
There is days that I will maybe drink a little bit more Kratom tea than others, due to pain issues or anxiety or, certain things that it definitely has a calming effect for me, which is a huge part of feeling better. I know where my body hits that wall, and that
Mm-hmm.
wall's at about day 5 and day 6. That's why I generally take about a 4 to 5 day break each month. And we're not still to this day really sure if it's an anxiety and PTSD reaction buildup that has been kind of underlying, or if it's the actual movement disorder that kind of reappears. We don't really know, because it's not like, you see people that have certain movement disorders that can vape some, cannabis products and it just shuts it off. Now, that doesn't work for me. I can't just, once I hit that wall, I'm going to have a few days that are going to be very rough for me because the movement disorder comes back.
Yeah. And that's the Meige syndrome, right?
Yes, Meige syndrome. Anybody listening, get involved. Do whatever you can do. If that means making a donation, great. If that means getting on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and other social media and raising awareness about things like your life stories, get those out there. If that means making videos for YouTube, get those out there. If you can, put your feet on the ground and get out there and speak to your legislators and lawmakers in your area, because typically we're seeing most of the ban pushes coming at the city and state level, and the only people that can really make an effect are the people that live in those cities and states. And so if you're listening to this right now and you're saying, hey, what can I do to help? Get out there and meet your legislators, even if they're not from your party, even if they're independents, if they're Republicans, if they're Democrats, if they're socialists, if they're libertarians, it doesn't matter. Go out and meet them, find out what their stance is, and make sure they're getting all the information, because that's the way we keep this plant legal.
Next, from episode 54, we have Jaclyn O'Shea. Jackie lives in Pittsburgh, and I saw a letter she wrote about Kratom to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Her husband fought in Iraq, suffered from horrible PTSD, and took his own life. Jackie is also a combat veteran who served in Afghanistan. At the time of our interview, she was studying to be a veterinarian.
We would go into, we were a small group of female NCOs and maybe 1 or 2 soldiers that would go into villages, and we would talk to the women and children because our men couldn't. So we would go in and we would, so we were able to talk to the women. We were able to gather information from them, kind of like winning the hearts and minds.
Mm-hmm.
But for years we were in Afghanistan, we were missing 50% of the population, because the men would go in there and then they would just put all the women in a room and and then also they had men that were hiding under burqas, like men that we were looking for hiding under burqas, so.
Okay.
So we were there winning the hearts and minds, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2013, when my husband passed, I was like, I have to get out. Somehow I have to get out. I was going on almost 10 years active duty, and I was just burnt out.
And you did 2 tours in Afghanistan?
Yes, I did 2 tours.
So you did 2 tours. So how long is one tour?
1 year. But my husband actually got out after 11 years. He was 11 Bravo. He was infantry. And he actually got embedded through the El Paso Times to go to Afghanistan to do a story on me. So he was actually a freelance combat journalist.
Oh wow!
So yeah, it was actually a surprise. I had my sergeant major was like, hey, you're gonna have a journalist doing missions with you, eating dinner with you, blah 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 blah. He's like, mind your P's and Q's. So I was like, oh okay. So I wrote him, and he's like, yeah, that's me. I was like, what?
That's crazy.
He ended up in Afghanistan for a little while with us.
So did you meet your husband in the Army?
I did. I met him in Germany. We were stationed in Germany, the same post. He was in Iraq a few times. Okay. He was in the Battle of Fallujah. He was never deployed to Afghanistan. He was only there as a journalist. Yeah, one of the first things he said to me, we were in a Chinook, and he's like, why does my wife have the M4 and I got a camera? I was like, well, you got out, like that's your fault. It was kind of like a roller coaster for us because we got married in 2011. We moved to the United States in 2011. He got out of the Army in 2011. I deployed to Afghanistan in 2011. And then by the end of 2011, he was in Afghanistan. So that whole year was like hit the ground running for us. Yeah, I actually re-enlisted.
Okay.
I came back from Afghanistan. I was getting ready. I was getting used to being back in the States, kind of like getting used to everything. They offered me a new duty station. I got to pick Alaska. And I picked Alaska, and I was like, you know what? Like, it's a unit that's getting ready to deploy. I just got my skill identifier for the job, for the female engagement team job. Like, it's like on my ERB, and I was like, okay, so I'm going to this infantry company or this infantry brigade that's on orders to deploy. I was like, it's 99.9% chance that I'm going to deploy as a female engagement team NCO. So I was going to get ready to PCS to Alaska, deploy again, and then next thing you know, he committed suicide. So, and I would say it was a shock, but there were some warning signs, plenty of warning signs. And
you said that like a lot of his brothers in combat were starting to commit suicide. I mean, how many people did you all know that committed suicide?
I personally didn't know any of them. From his first unit, there was I believe five. Five of them. Wow. He was in the Battle of Fallujah, and just not too long ago, there was this chaplain that was with all of them through that. I think he was a captain at the time. He's a colonel now, but he was there during Fallujah. He was there through all the suicides. I mean, it was just like one after another, after another, after another.
Wow.
And then when Brandon did it, like he was the one who like contacted me. We talked on the phone probably like every other day. And it's so tragic because of that mission, because of that company. One of them just got the Medal of Honor last year. And it's so sad because they're not here to see that. Looking back on it, I was still active duty, and I was busy all the time. I would come home, and in our house, he had his own office where he would write, and like he would have like maps of like where he was going to go, like freelance and stuff like that. There was a map of Syria, and I was like, that's a suicide mission. Like, you can't go do that. He's like, that's the point. He'd make all these references, and
man.
I'm like, yeah. There was this one time when I was in Afghanistan and he was home. He was messaging me, and he was threatening suicide, and to the point where everything, like all contact, would just go black. And then I would have to find a way from Afghanistan to find a way to get a hold of the El Paso Police Department to do a welfare check. Yeah. And I'm all the way across the world. He had to do inpatient help. There would be times like he was constantly drinking, constantly. And then he would get so drunk, he would be whacked out drunk, and he wouldn't remember anything he was saying, and he would threaten it all the time. Yeah. It was just so sad to watch him go down this hole. And then the VA was giving him all kinds of weird medication. And then like it would be like Razapam or something like that. And then they gave him like Ambien or something, and he would eat all of the Ambien. Like he would just take all of his pills at once, and I would have to watch him. Yeah. I would have to like regulate it. Like, so we didn't have a perfect marriage. I mean, we did not. It was a really, really, really hard. Mm-hmm. And when I got the knock on the door that night with the detective, I was literally just sitting there at watching TV, and I thought he got arrested. Mm-hmm. So I was like, oh my Lord, what happened? You know what I mean? I'm like, oh no, what happened? And that's when they told me, and it was almost like I knew it was going to happen. Mm-hmm. And I hate to say that, but it was like, it was shocking, but it's like all the warning signs were there. And he's already been inpatient and outpatient. And I'm like, what? Like, and it was just the worst part, like the worst thing in my entire life. Yeah. Like, I wish I could turn back time. And I wish I knew what Kratom was back then. Yeah. I really do. And like, that's why I'm here today, to talk about that, because I honestly believe, like, in my heart, if he knew what it was, he wanted help. If I knew what it was, if he knew what it was, like, I think that I believe in my heart that it would help him. Me and my dog Annabelle, we left, went across the country, walked the Appalachian Trail. Didn't do the whole thing, but we stayed up there for like 2 months. Awesome. And then we drove back with my friend, who I thought was a complete idiot, right? He just likes to spend money. And he's like, oh, I bought these 2 little energy shot things for like $20. And I was like, well, you're an idiot. He's like, I was like, I don't want that stuff. Like, I don't do energy shots, right? Yeah. And we're sitting there at like a restaurant or something, and he's like, whoa. He's like, you need to take this. He's like, but just take a half of one. And I was like, why? I was like, he's like, just trust me. He's like, I've never felt like this before. And I was like, okay. So I do. And I was like, whoa, I'm like the calmest I've ever felt in my entire life. And this is in 2014. And I'm like, what is this stuff? I was like, I feel really good. Like, and this is at probably like my peak of like drinking morning, noon, night. Like, I have to wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning to like take a shot, or else I'm going to be in like withdrawal. Like, I was bad. Like, the Appalachian Trail, that's like one of the reasons why I stayed out there, because I wanted to like detox. But I would always go into town and like resupply. You know what I mean? So it was like my worst enemy. Same with the Colorado Trail. But like I felt calm, like my soul was at ease. And I was like, wow, this stuff is really, really cool. So I got like a couple more, and then I kind of just forgot about it. And I was like, it's so expensive, like these things are tiny. And there were those little like tinctures, or extract.
Yeah, extract shots.
Literally helped me through school. I didn't have like the need to drink, thank God. It helped me stop.
Yeah.
Like I knew like I was gonna get nowhere in life. Like my attitude was different when I drank. I was a horrible person. Like I couldn't stand people. Like I was a jerk, I was like, I didn't like anybody. Like I'm like, I'm going to end up being like a horrible old lady sitting at the end of the bar. You know what I mean? Like, broke. I'm going to end up spending all of my money. Like, it's just, I don't want that for myself.
Yeah,
like, I'm not going to be able to function at school. I'm not going to be able to like finish my degree.
Yeah.
I'm not. And then being in the medical field, like, could you imagine if you were in a surgery room and then you were trying to put like a catheter and your hands are so shaky, you'd
be killing kittens left and right.
Exactly. And I would not be that person. I mean, mistakes happen when you're completely sober.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't want to be that person. And Kratom helped me get my life back.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I'm trying to be careful with what I say. Like it's a cure-all, because I'm not trying to say it's a cure-all at all. I'm just trying to say it helps me personally. I wanted to give back. So now I'm trying to like volunteer my time. Like I don't have that much money to donate, but like I want to donate some of my time, or at least get my story out there.
Up next, from episode 20, it's Jennifer Van Blanc. Jennifer's lifelong dream for a career in the military was cut short due to an injury. She used opiates to deal with physical and emotional pain, which led her to an addiction. She was able to turn her life around through the use of Kratom and microdosing psilocybin.
I was in basic training, and about 5 days before, this is all relevant to like my Kratom story, so about 5 days before graduation, we had this one final push-up, sit-up, run test. It's called the PFA, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, a couple laps into that, I broke my heel. There was a legitimate crack in my heel. To this day, when I get x-rays done, there's still like a little, you can see a line where it didn't heal correctly. Anyway, that happened when I got out of my rack one morning to go to the bathroom. And I was on the top rack. So I had to land on it the wrong way. Whatever happened, there was a crack in my heel. So my run time, I was off by 6 seconds.
Yeah.
So, they rolled me back because I did double push-ups, double sit-ups, all that stuff, and still 6 seconds I got rolled back. So I had to go through basic training again. But each time, like, I was able to run for my PFA, like, I think once a week. And each time my run got slower and slower because my foot hurt more and more. But I didn't say anything to him because I knew I'd be out. You know what I mean? Like, that's like a discharge right there. Because I was like 25 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I finally ran out of Tylenol. I had to go to medical to get more ibuprofen. They give everybody ibuprofen 800s like it was candy. So I went to go get more of that. And they asked me what was wrong, why I needed some. And if I had told them I had cramps, I'd be in the Navy today. But I was honest with them. And I told them, I said, my foot hurts. So they asked me why. And, I said it feels like it feels like there's a nail going through my foot and like shooting up my heel. So I got an x-ray, and about probably 4 hours later, I got told I was going home, and that kind of killed me. But I was in basic, all that whole process lasted like 6 months.
Yeah.
So that's why I still had the designation veteran, you know what I mean? But I didn't get to go do anything.
So you had to be discharged because of an injury for permanently?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I don't get medical or anything like that. I never applied for anything because I'd rather just go work. But, yeah, to this day, when it snows and rains out and stuff like that, if I have to walk, if I'm on my foot a whole lot, oh, yeah, that sucker hurts.
Oh, yeah.
So, anyway, but I got Percocets. And
Okay.
that's where everything began. That's why I say it's all relevant. When I got discharged, I didn't have any insurance.
Okay.
So I had to get them off the street.
Okay. Yeah.
And, having to go to work so that you can get the money to buy the pain pill, you know what I mean? And then I realized when I was taking the Percocet for the pain that it killed the emotional pain too.
Yeah.
Dude, the only thing I wanted for my entire life was just, military. That's the only thing that was ever on my mind,
Yeah.
But anyway, that's where all my stuff started. I was at the point where I was like, you know what? If somebody says they have heroin, I'm going to try it. Because
Yeah.
I could smoke it or I could snort it. I don't have to shoot it, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't like needles. And I'm like, I have tattoos, but I'm not a big needle person.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that night I'm making phone calls. And the only person that had anything was this kid around the corner from me. He had Suboxone. So I said, well, what the hell is that? Because I'd never heard of it before,
Mm-hmm.
So he explained it to me, and I went and I got one off him for like $10. And 2 weeks later, I had my own Suboxone doctor. You know what I mean? Like, I was at the point where I was desperate enough. Like, I knew I needed help. When I'm sitting there starting to think about heroin, My addiction started about 2006, and that lasted for around 5 years. And at the very end of that was when I found the Suboxone. And then I was on those for about 5 years. But I wanted off of them. I thought this was going to be the thing that I could take to get my brain off of the pills. And, then I'll be okay to go. Suboxone was 10 times worse of an addiction than the pills ever were. I felt like the lowest amount that I was able to get down to, I got down to 2 milligrams every other day of the Suboxone strips. I would cut them up and I would sell the rest of them.
Yeah.
Like, I'd flip them and sell them. That's how I made money. I would need 2 a week. They gave me 3 a day.
You said it was worse than the other stuff. How was it worse?
Oh, my God, yeah. The withdrawal is absolutely unbelievably painful.
Yeah.
The withdrawal from Suboxone, I've spoken to, a friend of mine, we're talking like a day out of her having a needle in her arm, and she's telling me that she don't want the Suboxone because the withdrawal from that is worse than the heroin. And I got to agree with her because I felt, I never did heroin, but I felt that it was way worse than anything that I got from oxys or anything else.
Yeah.
The chemical, it hooks you. You cannot get off of it. I couldn't go more than 24 hours without at least a piece of a milligram. I had to have at least a milligram or two every 24 hours.
Yeah.
Or I would start getting sick. For years, this went on. Like, I literally was just waiting to die.
Yeah.
Like, literally, like that's, and I'm not even exaggerating at all. Like, I was just waiting. Like, I would go out of the house and be like, man, I hope I get hit by a bus today. Like, I would legitimately hope for that to happen.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a drug, man.
Yeah. So when did you first hear about Kratom?
Okay. Actually, I was in the Suboxone doctor's office, and there was this one girl that I used to ride up to the doctor's office with. She asked me the one day when we were sitting in there. She's like, "You ever heard of this stuff called Kratom?" And I didn't know what the hell it was, but I was curious, so I looked up. So I was doing a little bit of reading on it. So I went over to Wonderland. It's a head shop in Philly, and I paid $45 for 15 capsules of something. It was some type of silver, crazy expensive, but I had no idea. I didn't know any better. That day, I think I took all 15 caps within probably 3 or 4 hours, and it didn't do anything. I was completely unaware of, like, how Kratom worked. You know what I mean? Like, if you're uneducated, you just go and do something, and you're not doing it the right way. You don't know the whole process. And it actually did nothing. So I thought it was a bunch of bullshit. Like, oh, that's one of them hippie things, and it's not going to work for me. I need actual chemicals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But a couple months later, I ran into a friend of mine from high school, and woman, I haven't seen her in 20 years. And we were talking, and ended up that she had the same problems I did with the Percocets and everything else. Her position was a little bit further than mine. She went to the heroin and stuff like that. But regardless, she was taking Kratom at the point. I think she said she'd been on it maybe 2 or 3 years at the time we were talking. So she explained both to me about online and the vendors and lab testing and the different colors and the strains and what they do and how to take it and when to take it and all that stuff. So she gave me a couple of bags of it, and I was still skeptical. I was like, whatever, we'll see. Anyway, this was around New Year's. So I'd go out, New Year's, Philadelphia, it's like a whole big thing.
Mm.
So I'd go down on New Year's Day, and on my way home, I was walking home, and my knee gave out on me, my right knee, which is bad knee anyway. I already had surgery on it and stuff. But my knee gave out, right? So I went home, and I was on Suboxone and stuff like that, and I was in so much pain, but I knew that the hospital's not going to do anything for me because I'd been through this before. I just had to, wait it out, give it a couple of days, let the swelling go down. So I said to my dad, my dad's got a very bad back. He had about 9 surgeries himself. but he gets prescription OxyContin. So I asked him for one because, I mean, my knee was the size of a softball, you know, so he gave me one. Even I've been sober for years, well, you know, clean off of the perks from the street for years. So I took a 20 milligram OxyContin, and it didn't do anything. Like, I was in a lot of pain, like to the point I had tears in my eyes one point. So I had this bag. She had the Red Horn, I believe was the first one that I tried. So I was like, you know what? I said, this stuff is supposed to be good for pain. I said, what the hell? You know, I'll take it. So I took a half a teaspoon, and about 15, 20 minutes later, my knee pain was gone. Like, it really, it took the pain away to the point where it was just a dull throb. Like, I was sitting there eating ham and cheese sandwich, happy as hell, watching a movie.
Yeah.
It was absolutely unbelievable. And it took me, the one thing that I had a hard time getting over on the transition from Suboxone to Kratom was the fact that I felt good. Like, I didn't think that I deserved that feeling. Because number one, I never thought I'd feel like that ever again in my life. I thought that was dead and gone, buried in the past, not going to happen.
Yeah.
And I felt fantastic. I was happy. I was in a good mood. I was looking forward to the future. And this is all after, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 days of taking Kratom by itself. So I actually stopped, and I'd continued going to the doctor for the next, like, month, because I had to wrap my head around it. You know what I mean? I had to, like, get in the mind frame, like, okay, yeah, you know, I can be a decent human being again. I can have a little bit of hope, you know? It took a while to adjust to that. Like, when I first started, as soon as I woke up, I had to take it. 6 months into it, I could be awake for 20 minutes, a half hour before I felt that need. A year into it, I could be awake for a couple hours before I had to have it. You know what I mean? 3 years later, I wake up and I'm like, oh, you know, I don't even think about it until my back starts hurting or my foot starts hurting or I'm fucking miserable for whatever reason it is. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You have to give your body time to heal. And so many addicts want an immediate, you know, overnight cure, and they think that this is what it's supposed to be, and it's not like that. You have to put in the time and the time and the work. I mean, you figure for me, it took me, I had to spend, what, 1.5 years, 2 years taking Kratom every day to get to a point where my body pretty much doesn't even remember the effects of the Percocets and everything that I put it through for 10 years. That's a pretty goddamn good trade-off, if you ask me. I got off easy. And my recovery was painless. I mean, don't get me wrong, the emotional stuff, you have to go through that on your own. Yeah. And that's a, you know, personal process for everybody. The physical part, that was, I mean, it was painless. So I did microdosing too with magic mushrooms. And that was amazing.
How was that?
Oh, yeah.
I've never actually microdosed them.
I felt like I leveled up in life. I've never taken mushrooms ever in my life. I mean, I like eating mushrooms, but I've never tripped on shrooms, anything like that.
Yeah.
So I was real skeptical at first, and the guy that I ended up talking to, he was walking me through it. So I said, all right, you know, fine. It's a microdose. It's like 1/10 of a gram. You know, it's not going to make me see, you know, Smurfs running around. Yeah. And it'll be okay. So it was crazy. The first time I had, you know, it's an itty bitty little scoop, and it just tastes like mushroom, you know, no big deal. But I was sitting there, and it was crazy. It felt like I was getting hit in the back of the head, and it was going, open up, open up, open up, open up. You know what I mean? And then finally, I was like, you know, I let my defenses down, I guess, you know, and it came through, and it was like, it just, man, I guess it kind of like walked me through my past trauma, because a lot of my emotional stuff came from not being able to, you know, fulfill my want to be in the military. But they helped. But honestly, the mushrooms, it helped me see that my path was not the military this lifetime. You know what I mean? That might have been my path last lifetime, which helps me in this life. I mean, it sounds absolutely insane, but once you go through it, you completely understand, and it makes total sense. I know what I sound like. I know it sounds absolutely insane, but I felt like I leveled up in life because it just helped me understand so much more and accept things that I didn't even want to think about. A big thing with addiction is that you develop your addiction in private. You do. You develop your addiction in private, but you might do drugs with friends. But the extent of your addiction and the depth of it, that's personal. Exactly. That's only on you. Yep. You know what I'm saying? And some people go so far in the hole, they don't know how to fucking get out. That's what happened to me. I didn't know where to go, who to turn to. I was afraid, everything. Mm-hmm. But Kratom, it lets you don't have to go to an AA meeting or an NA meeting and stand up and tell a room of 50 people your deepest, darkest secrets. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't have to go to a shrink and sit there and, lament over things that happened years ago. You can work on this all in your bedroom, in your house, by yourself, in your own mind. And it actually works.
Yeah.
I mean, the privacy aspect of Kratom is just shoots up the benefits 1,000 times more than any other recovery program.
Finally, from episode 16, we have Andy Knowles. Andy's wife contacted me and we did this interview. Long story short, Andy was kicked out of the Navy after a 15-year career because he used Kratom to successfully control depression and anxiety. What kind of job did you do in the Navy?
Oh, I was a gunner's mate, so anything guns. More specifically, I went to those follow-on schools I was talking to you about was for cannons. If you're familiar with Navy ships, some of them have like the huge cannon on the front of the ship.
Mm.
So that was my like primary job for the first my first like 6 years was doing that, and so that was like my first ship in a nutshell, was working on these cannons, and also like small arms and machine guns and what have you, but that was the main job. I spent some time doing that and then left there, stayed in San Diego, but and then I ended up teaching that same school, for the cannons. I was teaching that for 4 years. Got to do a little like, it's shore duty is what it's called, so you do sea and shore, so they kind of rotate you. So my shore duty was teaching those cannons.
Did you serve overseas?
I did, several deployments overseas, Middle East or China or Africa. Got to see the world, and got to do some cool stuff, and things that most 20-year-olds don't do. It was good, bad at times, good at times, but I loved it. I mean, the culture you get to like you're immersed in, and it's one thing to like watch it, say on the Travel Channel or watch it on TV, but to go like be basically like dropped off for like a day or two, and be like, okay, go experience that, and then you don't speak the language. It's cool. It's humbling because you're the outsider, and I thought it was a cool experience. I'd gone to Navy's medical and mental health for depression and anxiety, because I was just having a hard time, in life, and which like who isn't? But I wanted to do something about it. So, and I had some bad experiences with the military's healthcare, and I'm not speaking for anybody but myself, but my first sort of like I guess view into mental health treatment was I went in and filled out the paperwork, and it was like a bunch of like on the scale of 1 to 10, like how bad are you feeling and all this stuff, and I finally got to like sit with a doctor at mental health, and it's my very first time sitting with a doctor, and the way it went was I sat in his room and he was on his computer the whole time and never once looked at me, and he was like, what's the matter? And I was like, I don't know. I'm not enjoying like being alive. Like I don't want to die, but I'm not enjoying like life at all.
Oh God, I know that feeling.
His train of thought was like everywhere. It wasn't like he had like it was almost as if like he was reading a script that didn't make sense. I left feeling like, what the hell was that? I just wasted like 2 hours out of my day.
Yeah.
So, and nothing ever came of it. It was just, I answered some questions to a guy who probably couldn't tell you what hair color I had, but and that was it, like the end. I was like, well, okay, maybe that's how it is, like how it goes. Obviously nothing improved after that session. So I went back again a second time and met with a different doctor. Didn't ask me anything. It was, I've looked at your paperwork. Here's a prescription for Paxil. Go fill it. Take it how the bottle says. I can't say that the offer wasn't afforded to me to talk to someone, because it was. It was. By the way, don't forget we got these services. With people you can talk to. So I went and did that. And like that was more helpful than any of the doctors that I was seeing. At the mental health. Because I'm just spilling my guts about everything to this, this stranger. So it was good. I liked it. But I mean, it wasn't like nothing was changing, I thought, so I started researching civilian healthcare providers that accepted my insurance, and I met up with a doctor in San Diego who sort of same thing. He prescribed me. He's like, try this. It's gabapentin, and I guess it was like still in the trial phase for anxiety and depression. I don't know if you've ever even heard of it, but I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. It was definitely a ride, like as far as that medicine goes, but it wasn't. It was like something that, like, 15 minutes after the first time I took it, I was like, I can't be doing this. Like, this one's not going to be beneficial. So, cut to, I'm not taking it anymore. And like, that's kind of it. So, I mean, I've got family members, close family that have, had depression problems and kind of got the same thing from their doctors. Like, here's these pills, take these pills. And one of them was like, well, I'm taking Kratom now for this, and like never felt better.
Okay.
It wasn't something I'd ever really heard about. You hear about like pharmaceuticals, you hear about all that, but like I hadn't heard much about it, except for, firsthand, like, I'm taking this now and it's like a life changer, So cut to, I'm taking Kratom, do a little research, like everybody else does, Google it, and bought it, took it, and, within a couple days I was like, this isn't bad. It's doing something here. So I stuck with it. I've still got issues, with the depression and anxiety, but I'm a functional depressed person, and I'm far more functional now than I was before. That's for sure, I mean, to sum it up, it's revengeful exes. It was an ex-husband. There's, a lot of like hard feelings there or whatever. When I initially got pulled into a legal office, I was still taking Kratom, and that I was getting questioned about like everything under the sun about my life except for Kratom. Like, they never mentioned it. So, but that's what they were leading towards, but they never said it though. Like during, like, it was like an interrogation type of thing, right? But it was never about Kratom. I left there going like, what in the hell was that? And went about living my life. I was like, kept taking Kratom because like we hadn't talked about it. I didn't know at the time, like, it's banned because everybody knows, like, you don't go to work in the military and shoot heroin in the morning. You don't go smoke crack before you go to work. And I'm sure like people listening that may be in the military would be like, well, I knew that, but I'd kind of have to call bullshit on that because nobody knew about it or what it was at all.
Yeah.
But what they, so I get accused of doing drugs, basically. So I was like, okay, let's take the drug test. Cool. So I go take a urinalysis, right? Leave. That took several weeks to come back. In that meantime, I had gone to court for child custody, and where my ex was bringing up in court like he's on drugs, he's doing heroin, he's doing opiates, all this stuff. I was like, well, I beg your pardon, no, I'm not. And my lawyer's like, go get a hair test like today. So immediately left court, went and paid like the $160 for a hair test, did the hair test. I'm not on drugs. So it's a whole bunch of that. And then I get pulled into an office at work, and they're like, your drug test results are back. You have to go see substance abuse rehabilitation. I was like, for what? Like, I've already proved, like, even with a hair test, I'm not doing drugs. And they're like, well, we tested you for Kratom. And I was like, well, why would you do that? And the guy who's telling me this is where I work. It was our drug and alcohol. Every command has like a drug and alcohol abuse like rep, right? Mm-hmm. And that's who's telling me this. And I was like, well, why are they testing me for that? And he's like, I have no clue. So that's guy number one that didn't know. So, okay, I go to this substance abuse rehabilitation place for, it's kind of like an outpatient interview, basically, to determine if I'm, like, dependent on anything. So I had to do that twice, actually. I had to talk to 2 doctors. It was all part of, like, the legal, like, I was, like, legally obligated to do it. So I talked to them. The people at the substance abuse rehabilitation program had no clue what Kratom was. And the second doctor I saw was like, it sounds like this stuff is actually working for you, like it's helping you. I was like, yeah, it is. It's helping a lot. He said, well, unfortunately, it's banned. And so I'm thinking, okay, so it's banned. Let's just stop, I guess we'll just quit taking it. But come to find out, that's not how it's going to go. They're going to have to start processing legal action. So I'm like, well, if I'm screwed, I'm not going to stop taking it because, if I'm getting kicked out, like, this is what I'm doing. So, went through the whole legal thing and, did the cliche, like, you see in the movies where it's like the guy is in trouble and he's getting yelled at and, I'm being called a drug addict. I'm being called a bad father. I'm being called, you name it. I'm like, look, like, I'm not doing drugs. I'm not addicted to drugs. I don't have an issue. I was taking something that turns out it was banned and I had no clue. Like, that's the story, My biggest takeaway was the amount of misinformation and lack of knowledge about it is ridiculous. It's actually helped me. I've been depressed for I don't know how long now, been anxious, been suicidal at times, and here I am talking to you on the phone, and there's a lot to be said about that. And of course, like, now I'm especially now still taking Kratom now. I mean, I took it right before the phone call because, I've just lost a 15-year career because some ex-husband was pissed off at me. And, like, who wouldn't be bummed out, But, I'm having a good day today, my wife, and we're having fun.
Big thanks to Drew Turner, Jaclyn O'Shea, Jennifer Van Blanc, Andy Knowles, and all the other veterans we've had on the podcast. And all you veterans listening today, happy Veterans Day. The music is by Risey. The song is called Memories of Thailand. Acoustic guitar music was played by me. The Kratom Science podcast is written and produced by me, Brian Gallagher, for KratomScience.com. Take care.